Hey people, Doctor Strange here. Alright, 𝐿𝐷ebon here, and welcome back. Today, actually yesterday, we received banger rework for Gley. Devs really cooked with this one. And one of her abilities, which I really dig, and especially since I like shooter games and gunslinging, very nice. But before we start, as usual, a little disclaimer, it might be not the best build from this rework, but if you're new here, we're doing things for fun, and this is lots of fun. Enjoy. Before we start, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly? Good, do I really need to explain? However, what I do really like about the Gley, that she has no MP, no shields, infinite ammo, so much maneuverability with the mods, and you have almost no penalties. Bad, I wish we could move and turn with that ability, even with non-sprint speed. That would be really cool. And ugly, there is a little bit of RNG involved with custom resources, but I will teach you how to mitigate that. Alright, let's roll. The modules. The top row is mostly to squeeze as much damage as possible, though we don't really need that because we have really high multiplier. There is one drawback with developers doing it, because like half of the modules are now being useless, since skill power modifier is basically increasing it flat. I think after reworks will be finished, those modules will just go trash can. Anyway, main focus for us is to get as much crit damage as possible, because with her ability we have 100% skill crit rate while we're using that ability. Cooldown optimized for fun to never stop, since the animation of the skill is actually a little bit longer before the cooldown starts, and you don't need the full 90% cooldown cap. One expansion mod for range to be 100%. With the arcade tunic we can reach that, however we don't need any more of that because the skill cap is 200%. However, the range is ludicrous, even with the default one is 18 meters, it's one of the highest range in the game, and maxed out it's 36 meters. Sadly they removed the inversion passive, which lets you to cap that, however we don't care about it much, it's like only 0.5 meters. Potent collector to increase the amount of fun we can have, and a spear and shield for the skill power and the defense for tankiness. Why not HP? Whole screen dies. Just don't stand to respawns with your bag, plus we get 20% damage reduction from this skill, and that on top of the ultimate, which gives you 50% damage reduction, with a small amount of 4% if you're in non-frenzy state from your passive. And that actually adds up, not multiplicative. But later about that in how to play section. Ancestor module. Crit damage is the king. However, if you can get on top of that non-attribute skill power and dimension skill power with some useless negative stat, you essentially can double your damage. And the trigger module, Power Beyond, for the less hassle. In the tips and tricks section I will explain that you can use different ones, however for simplicity and quality of life we go with Power Beyond. Weapons doesn't really matter for the damage because our skill is not benefiting from the weapon at all. However, there are stat sticks for the skill damage. It is the Peacemaker, it gives you non-attribute skill power, really useful. You don't really need to build that, however if you wish to kill those bosses with the weak point mechanic, you can build whatever. Here is my build, I will not go through that, I just build it for the stat stick. And the second weapon, Hypernova. If you don't have it, that's fine, you can use the Shadow. You don't need to build that weapon as well. The main reason we're using that, to gather the custom resource, but I will explain that in how to play section. For the third slot, Bringer bossing weapon can be anything as long as you will have a good killing time, because sometimes generating resources RNG could be bad. Reactor, non-attribute of course, cooldown and crit damage for the max benefit and quality of life. Some alternatives will be discussed later. Components, mage set. Enough said. Since it's Gley, you benefit only from HP and defense. Everything else you can go full resistance if you wish. For the cores, max HP and defense. Arcade tunic, cooldown, top priority for quality of life, skill power for the damage obviously, range 1 pointer to get it as close as possible to 36 meters, and crit damage of course for the even more damage. For the mutated cell, we're using cohesion. Yes, you could squeeze some more damage with resistance reduction, however for resistance reduction to work, you need to time your mage set for the maximum resistance reduction, plus it only works from the second hit. And most of the time stuff dies in one hit. And the inversion. The new one, we're mostly caring about the damage reduction, HP regen. However, you can go with something else as a third one, you can go with movement speed or something else. doesn't really matter. However, if you will level it up, you will use some passives from the last nodes. And the last but not least, Fellow. We don't have MP, we don't need ammo, we're going with this good boy. Alternatives. Do you need more HP? You can replace Spear and Shield with additional HP. Steam Accelerant gives you the most HP, plus the penalty doesn't really matter for Gley. If you need even more HP, you can remove the one pointer here, and go those two nodes with HP. If you want to experiment, you can also replace this with the skill cost reduction. However, if you follow rotation, you should not be having any issues with the cost. If you don't mind 1-2 second cooldown, you can replace Focus non-attribute with the non-attribute specialist and the reactor instead of cooldown with dimension power. It will give you around 7% damage increase. However, quality of life here is a top priority. And if you want to go completely overkill, you can use Life on Edge. That will give you additional crit damage. However, you need to micromanage your life, because it gives you bonuses while you're having less than 50% of HP. That and additional HP tips before will help you do it. But personally, for me, it's not worth the hassle. So, how to play that? I personally not use Frenzy. For me, the only thing we're getting from that is the sprint. With the sprint, we have also third ability and the weapon cores, which can reach almost the same amount. However, on top of the non-frenzy state, we're getting 20% damage reduction from her second ability and more life resource collected from the enemies. When you're starting out or you don't have many mobs, start with the third skill to get more custom resource. You use your Hypernova to generate those custom resources, and then you go ballistic. Most of the time you will have enough resources to repeat that. However, if not, you use the same process again. And don't be like me, switch to your Peacemaker before you're using your ultimate. Occasionally you can use the second skill to heal yourself up or give yourself 20% damage reduction. Really useful in the high-end content. I'm out of resources, I switch to Hypernova, activate the third skill, and just go with the ability. When you switch back from your Hypernova, it deals AoE explosions, juicing you even a bit more. If you don't have enough resources on your Hypernova, or you don't have Hypernova at all, just slash the mobs, it works as well. Don't tell NS players, this thing works through walls. One important thing, don't let mobs to spawn behind your back, because you cannot move during that animation. If you're on the boss and you don't have custom resources, activate your third ability and slash couple times. For the bossing, ideally you will shoot mobs as well to generate your custom resources. However, if you're out of resource, the same tactics works as well. Activate your third skill, activate AoE from the Hypernova, and you have some resources to shoot back. Tips and tricks time. Learn the spawn location of the mobs. You will be shooting multiple waves with one skill use. If you're low on HP, your second ability does wonders. You just activate it once, you almost get full HP. As I mentioned before, this stuff goes through walls. NS players will not be happy. When you're using third ability, try to cast it mid-air to not lose speed. I love that. If you don't want to hustle with the melee weapons, you can bring some mobbing weapon, for example Malevolent or Thunder Cage. If on bossing your RNG is not so good, you can use Shadow, and its ability is also generating custom resource. Plus, while dashing, you avoid some of the boss attacks as well. Again, you don't need to build that, you just generate resources with this thing. And the last trick, while you're using your ultimate, your skill crit rate is 100%. You can combine that with some different trigger module. However, personally, I think it's not worth the hassle. So yeah, this is it. As usual, if there will be any updates, you will find them in the pinned comment. Let me know what you think of it. Have fun with this build, I really do. As always, thanks for watching. Peace.